I'll give you a very quick introduction. So my name is Tom. I've run a lot of tests in my career. I've been doing this for about 8 years, A/B testing, multivariate testing. Worked with a lot of different companies, working on their programs, running their programs, figuring out how to run these tests, and, well, we like to think generating them a bit of potential revenue and that sort of thing. So now, more recently, just about 9 months ago, I joined this company called Lost My Name. And I always hope whenever I give a little chat that some of you might have heard of Lost My Name. Has anybody heard of Lost My Name? Yeah, it's always like 2 or 3 people, and that's it. So it sounds boring so far, but I'll try and make it exciting. So I hadn't been on the client side for a long time, just joined this startup called Lost My Name, and they're actually one of the fastest e-commerce startups in the UK right now. So at Lost My Name, we make books, and we like to think that they're incredibly magical books. They're personalized books. We've got 2 books. The first one is called Lost My Name. This isn't working, I'm just going to use the laptop. So the first book is called The Little Girl or the Little Boy Who Lost His or Her Name, and it's built around the letters of the name. So it's not your, I know when you think personalized books, you think, just throw the name here, throw the name there. Everybody has the same story, you know, the traditional personalized children's books. But these books are actually engineered. We probably don't make the books, we actually create the engine that makes the books, or we allow you to make the books on our site. Every book is different based on the name of the child, the gender, the type of child, so we call it the adventurer type, so there's different diverse character versions, and a whole slew of other things. So I'll give you a quick example. This is a story about a girl named Bunny I thought was appropriate for this talk. She looked inside her wardrobe, she peered in all her drawers, she searched underneath her bed, crouched down on all 4s, and she's basically woken up and realized she's lost her name. Where's my name? I don't know my name. So she goes on this magical adventure, and on the way she meets a bear who can't get any sleep during hibernation season. She meets a unicorn who is having an identity crisis, a narwhal, a Naberlick. This is a really weird one. We've had some strange feedback about the Naberlick. It's basically a small kangaroo, and an existential yeti. So on the way, she gets a letter from each of them, eventually gets back home, and she's found her name. So this is how the book works. So we released our second book, however, in October. Right now, just available in the UK and the US. It's called The Incredible Intergalactic Journey Home. It was literally launched into space in about a week, well, a couple weeks. We have this thing called Storytime for Space, so we partnered with NASA. They took one book for a lucky child who won the competition up to space, where they've read the book and filmed it. And so this child actually got to go to the Kennedy Space Center and see the rocket go up to space in December, something like that. And now it's the next wave of PR, basically. So pretty cool stuff. I'm quite fortunate, I think, to be working at this company. So far, we've sold over 1.4 million books now across 167 countries. So that's pretty good for our vision, which is to basically try and create as many magical bedtimes over time as possible. So where does conversion rate optimization fit in all this? This is the reason I was brought on board to Lost My Name. It was to start a testing program, start building sort of a culture and a community of testing, data, user testing, surveys, anything that kind of feeds into the whole conversion rate optimization methodology. I'm just going to call it CROW for short moving forward. So where does CROW fit in all of this? We think of ourselves as a full stack publisher, because, so minus the print house partnerships that we have, we do not print the books, but we've built all the technology stack that actually generates the books, communicates with the front end of our site, and passes these previews of the books into the front end, so you can actually preview the book before you buy it. And everything else that goes with that. We don't actually sell our books. We did a bit of Amazon, not on the high street as a backup if our site completely goes down. We have a link to Not on the High Street, but we actually sell all of our books just through our own website. Also, what happens to Crow when you're in one of the fastest growing e-commerce startups in the UK? This is something I will also get to. And as you can imagine, you can see through the illustrations, I mean, I like to think they're quite beautiful, quite engaging, and it's actually one of the key reasons that people do end up buying the book, not just the personalization factor. But as you can imagine, incredibly design-centric company, and I think that has its challenges as well, especially when it comes to testing, because you have 400 opinions and just a bunch of arguments. And finally, with a product that appears to sell itself, can we actually optimize the site? Was I hired for no good reason at all, basically? I just twiddle my thumbs because the books sell themselves? Well, I hope not. So I don't have all the answers, but what I'm going to go into is what I've learned in the last 9 months since joining Lost My Name. 6 punchy lessons. Punchy can range from really long lessons to short lessons. I couldn't really say short lessons because some of them last a while. But I'll try to keep it entertaining. Please interrupt if you have any questions. So that's my intro. So lesson 1, okay, one of the first things I did when I joined the company was try to figure out what everybody was using. So in customer service, which we call happiness, in product delivery and operations, how were people getting their data? How were people understanding customers? What tools were we using? And I realized that we just had, this is just like the tip of the iceberg of some of the tools that we were using that overlapped and duplicated, and some people were comfortable with one, some people were comfortable with another, but they basically did the same thing. So we had, I don't know if any of you have worked in a startup before, but certainly everybody just buys SaaS like software because usually it's free, and then they implement it on the site, so you get 4 million tags, and everybody's using 4 million things for analytics, for testing, for everything. So when I first got on board, we were using 3 or 4 different tools for testing alone. So Optimizely was implemented. We were also using this Ruby gem called Split, which of course is free, and we had to make a decision on which one was going to give us better data and better insight. In analytics, we were using GA, we were using Mixpanel, we used something called Periscope data, which takes all the transactional data from the data warehouse and allows us to cut it up in different ways using SQL and other means. And you know, for session replay, heat maps, scroll maps, surveys, we had a whole bunch of things that we were using. I think I get shared a new product that comes out every single week by one of my colleagues. Hey, you should look at this. So we first, and then that was all underpinned by a tag management system called Segment. So these are just a handful of the tools that we were using. There was actually a lot more. So the first thing we did, first we needed to make sure that everything was integrated, the stuff that we wanted to use. They were all basically siloed. Optimizely wasn't passing any experiment data into analytics or into our data warehouse. Neither was Split. Hotjar was not integrated with anything. It was integrated with Optimizely or our analytics. So we basically had all this data floating around, but we didn't really have as much power behind it as we wanted. So we had to break that stuff down, figure out how to integrate all of these different products that we wanted to use. Then we removed a bunch of them. We ended up with these, which we still have, I'm glad to say, along with a few others. And once we kind of cleaned up these integrations, made sense of what we wanted to use as a company and what people were comfortable using with, and trimmed it down to these select products, we started to clean up our events, basically. We had something like 300 events or something being collected across the site, clicks, video, scrolling, everything. I don't think any one person in the company actually knew what all the events were for, because because they'd always been implemented on a sort of case-by-case need basis. So you end up with this huge stack of events with no centralized understanding of what those events mean, if some events still exist or don't exist. So we had to do a lot of boring admin documentation to collect all of that, understand how what all the events did and how they were all passed to different systems. And that was not a fun job, but it had to be done. Once we'd done all that, we had a much more powerful ability to segment our data on an ad hoc basis. We had these great sets of data through all of our tests, both through Optimizely and the integrations with Google Analytics, and also the ability to watch session replay on our site through Hotjar and know which experiment we were looking at, or experiment variation, rather. And we also saved some coin in the process because we got rid of a whole bunch of events no one was using and no one knew what they were for. So here's an example after that, how that benefited us from a CRO perspective, conversion rate optimization perspective, for those who just joined. So we ran this test, or we started to investigate this idea of a test, which we called the Short Names Don't Mean Short Stories AB. And this came about from, some customer feedback. So we talked to the happiness team, and they told us how, people were maybe not sure they were getting value for money when they had a name like mine, which was only 3 letters. And we also, so that led to us running a bunch of surveys through WebEngage. And so non-customers, we would intercept them in the funnel, understand, why haven't you bought? And they stressed that value for money was indeed a problem for them because my child's name is Tom, or what have you. So we came up with an idea to service this message, more magic. Short names don't mean short stories. We've added 4 extra pages to your magic tale. We also backed up the qualitative survey data by looking at the analytics. We now had the right events in place. We could write some regular expressions and segment the data to understand, if a name was 3 or 4 letters. And indeed, these 3 or 4 letter names, they do get a bit of a shorter story, but we, obviously, as the message says, we add a few pages. So we noticed that people did convert at a much lower rate whenever they searched for books with 3 or 4 letter names. So we're like, oh, this is great. Okay, we have all the ammunition we need to run this fantastic test. And so our hypothesis, displaying a message for shorter books will increase order conversion. And lo and behold, it didn't work. So this is not the end of the story. Our hypothesis was false. There was no change in conversion as a result of introducing this message into the site. But we had all this data. We were able to pull raw data, do a bunch of calculations and various programming to get this data in a certain way so that we could understand it better. We were able to understand that, hey, actually, you know what? There was a bit of promise in terms of the conversion rate just for the 3-letter name books. So it wasn't significant. We didn't have the sample size because we looked at running this test, across the entire 3- and 4-letter name population. So we decided to run it again and run it across all markets so that we could build up the volume and reach significance a little more quickly. So our hypothesis changed from 3 to 4-letter names to 3 to 3-letter names. So we ran a follow-up test, and lo and behold, yes, this is good news this time, we did manage to generate a very significant uplift in sales and orders of our books, 18.1%, just from this simple message. So this message should still be on the site today, unless something bad has happened. But a very interesting test, I think, for us to run that took from all sorts of areas of the business, but it really wouldn't have happened without the right data in place, the right integrations, because we wouldn't have gotten to the answers we needed or a follow-up. Any questions before I move on to lesson 2?
At what point do you show that message? After they put the name in? Or?
Yeah, so on the site, when you get to the Lost My Name product page, you have a form where you enter the name, the gender, the adventure type, and you create book. And when the page loads, we surface that overlay. I know overlays and modals aren't the most popular thing right now, but this one is working for us, and we were able to prove that and also get all the design-centric people who disagreed with overlays on our side eventually. But yeah, it was on page load. Yeah.
I have a question as well. Did you do a variant of the test where instead of heading it more magic, you headed it short names don't mean short stories, or something around the short names as the big heading? Yeah,
no, we didn't. So I think that's a great idea. We always want to continue to iterate on our tests and continue to follow up on them and build new versions of those. We moved on to other tests and we haven't revisited this, but there are follow-ups in mind way down the roadmap, basically. But yeah, very, very good point.
What were the extra 4 pages, and was there a margin impact because the books are bigger and printing?
Great question. So actually, I don't know the exact figures. There is an ideal kind of number of pages in a book. From 2 perspectives. So from our perspective, the ideal is actually when someone doesn't enter both their first and last name or like this ridiculously long name because they're trying to get their money's worth, because when you read that story to a child, they'll fall asleep after letter 4. So that's also one of the tests we want to run. We want to change the messaging in that way. It doesn't cost us that much more to print 4 pages or 2 spreads, so the margins were negligible, basically. Yeah. Cool. I will move on to squids. So this is an updated lesson from the one that John heard. We as a company, basically, we've gone through this whole restructure constantly because we're so fast growing. When I joined last June, we were just ending this sort of, model, product growth, ops, happiness, just these big, huge teams where people, there was good communication and there were merits to this sort of organization or structure. But in a startup, you need to ship fast and continuously. And if you don't, you probably get fired. So we had to change the model. And the new model was this idea of squads, because the old model was just getting a bit too tangled up. So we had all these different groups. They overlapped in all sorts of different ways, which made things confusing to some extent and required sign-off at too many levels. And so we walked away from that. Fire is a theme in this presentation. And what we wanted were capabilities like quick decision-making, a clear focus, fast learning, autonomy, basically. Autonomy to make decisions, good decisions, and accountability, good leadership to ship things on your own without having to answer to someone necessarily. Now that has good things and bad things. Someone could go completely rogue, but everybody's on the same mission at this point. So the idea of having smaller, multidisciplinary groups, limited overlap between those groups, very much a build, measure, learn culture, so some level of analyst and data within those groups, and basically leaders that could lead those teams, make decisions, feel comfortable making those decisions without asking many people, do you think this is okay? So that's a squad. So it has a lead, 2 to 6 team members, a mission that can be easily explained. So the squad formation I was in was called the Purchase Journey. There was a more fun name, but we probably shouldn't say that. I can't. I'll tell you later, off camera. Has clear and measurable KPIs. So Purchase Journey, you can imagine our goal is sales. Our goal is average order value, pushing people through the journeys and through the checkout. Can ship autonomously, and shipping is very measurable. So we moved to something that was like super simple looking like this. We did talk to each other, but there were these separate multidisciplinary groups that each had ownership of a very specific function within the company. So they had the ability to make changes, whether it was on the back end, the front end, anywhere, on their own, and try and drive success for their mission. So I really advocated this squad formation. I mean, it allowed me and my team to do some really great stuff. In just a few months, we ran 30 individual experiments, so 30 individual projects. I don't know how many variations of those tests that was made up of, but in my past experience in the vendor side, 30 experiments in a month is pretty good. Or sorry, 3 months is pretty good, 10 a month. Alongside that, we shipped another 15 projects or so. We had a mission to, as well, within the Crow discipline or function, to try and have a success rate of those tests. So 50%, we did achieve a 50% success rate, so positive outcomes. It might not always be attached to sales. It might be just pushing people further down the funnel. But we did manage a 50% success rate with the experiments that we ran. And I feel the squads, the autonomous squad structure was very much a big part of all this. So, all the squads, question mark. Sadly, no. So by the end of last year, about 5 or 6 months after this wonderful experiment within the company, we regressed to this tangled squid formation. And so we had to make some decisions. So one of the reasons this happened was, when I joined, it was a company of about 30, maybe 40. And by the end, 6 months later, we'd ballooned to 100 people. So you can start to imagine the confusion that starts to occur, the lack of, if you don't have communication down, if you don't know who to speak to, it just becomes a mess. People still want autonomy, so they're shipping things that might overlap with someone else. So it quickly became a bit, that was for emphasis, a bit out of control. So we had to make further change, and that change was instituted at the beginning of this year. So this simple structure became basically similar to what we had before, with a couple different names, just way, way bigger. So I am now not part of Purchase Journey. I am now head of something called Shop, which is basically the website, which is a much bigger team with a much bigger remit, because we have very different goals at this point. We only have those 2 products, but this year we have very big ambitions to expand that product portfolio to other books, potentially extensions, tiering, gifting, so there are all these things going on. And to do something like that, if you go to our site today, you'll notice, okay, there's a couple of journeys to create a product, and they're both linear, and they're both completely separated, and they're kind of inconsistent to some degree, and we need to now embark upon this journey where we're building something that will create consistency and experience across any product, no matter how you want to personalize it, and tie it all together and make our site better personalized as well. We make these amazing physical personalized products, but we don't really have the best personalization experience digitally. So this was actually a necessary change. So far, so good, but maybe if I talk here again, I can update this again. So the lesson here was, I think actually squads are a fantastic thing for a startup, up until a point. I think if you're in an incredibly fast growing company, then you do have to think about probably leaving that. I don't know if anybody's read about squad structure before. It was quite new to me when I joined the company. But Spotify has used this, and they have so many different levels. I don't know how they keep it up, but there's squads and tribes and guilds, and I don't know what comes above that. I guess the founders or something. So don't be afraid of squads. Pursue squads if you're in a startup, but be warned. Okay, yeah.
So squads kind of look to me like terrorist cells. You've got a clear mission, but
Yep.
not necessarily exposed to the rest of the company. And at some point, I guess you've got bigger, and those
Transparency issues, yeah.
have had to be plundered and exploded somewhat.
Yeah.
Interesting how that.
Yeah, I mean, but it was, it was amazing just when you have a smaller team, I think you just become a bit more tight-knit, and within that team you have amazing communication, and you have like one designer, one front-ender, one back-end, an analyst, and a product manager or something like that. And we're still moving into this new structure, so there's a couple of parts of the company that are still working in that formation, and they're very successful. They ship really well, and the only reason they haven't been just thrust into the new structure yet is because they're performing very well, but they're also performing on parts of our products that are quite isolated and can be worked on, and shipping can happen without too much overlap with other parts of the company. So yeah. This is a really short lesson. Best practice, the mythical creature. So this one is a given. Do a lot of you engage in testing, A/B testing at all? Yeah. There's no truth in testing. I mean, that's why we test, right? And so best practice, though, I mean, I came from a few roles across a couple of companies, and I'd seen so many tests run for tons of companies, e-commerce companies, B2B, lead generation, travel, everything, and you start to see certain things work pretty well. And as a vendor, when you're pitching to a new possible client, to a prospect, you want to surface these creative ideas that you've seen work before as a pitch, because people love hearing about that stuff. But all of those things that I learned in my last 8 years of being a conversion rate optimizer and working with hundreds of clients, almost all the tests that we ran that were similar to those have actually failed. So we did this sort of cart retargeting A/B. This is the only other modal test we've run, I promise. Our hypothesis was, okay, we're going to target return visitors if we recognize if they have something in their cart. With this wonderfully charming message, using our own elephant for the letter E, and we think that reminding them that they have things in cart and pushing them into checkout will increase conversion. So that was a false test, and we, no matter how we broke down the data for this test, we couldn't find anything that told us we were going in the completely wrong direction. It didn't make any difference. It was not negative, but it was not positive. And so we're going to think of ways of revisiting this. We ran it in a few different ways. We'd like to be a bit more subtle with it, but it's on the sort of backlog now. But that failed, along with some other ideas that I had from other successful e-commerce projects that I'd run. So we left that behind. Yeah.
I think it's because when people return to the site, their intention is to start from scratch. Is it just a case of, I don't want to deal with the complexity of having to go through this stuff I've done before?
Very, very possibly. I think it's a tough one, because I mean, when there's many different places that would make sense to slot someone back in the journey. Perhaps it's a case of someone not being able to re-preview the book. Maybe we shouldn't have pushed them into the checkout. Maybe we should have said, hey, don't you want to remember how wonderful this book looked? We'll put you over to the preview page. That's technically just the next step in the journey, so we're not really doing them a favor. I think there's a lot of question marks, but it's a really good question.
The one that was then, so that's the scope, the detail, so...
Right. How do we decide on the detail? Yeah. We tend to decide quite jointly. We often go through a few different iterations and possibilities of what we could test, depending on what the goal of that test is and what page, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's usually a combination of, maybe myself, a designer. We sometimes get some input from a developer, and we take that all on board. And it can be very tough because very often we'll have a lot of possible variations, and we need to trim that down to a reasonable number so that we can get a result in a reasonable amount of time, and be confident in the data that there's no false positives. So we need to figure out a way to trim that. And there are different sort of methods of isolating a particular learning. So I usually am a big fan of kind of having several different themes. So you might have a headline that is very oriented towards a parent or something like that. You might have something that's very gift-oriented. You might have something that is completely a different theme. Rather than focus on just a single theme for that headline, we'd like to try which themes work best, and then hone in on that theme and start to test iterations of that. So it could be inspirational, it could be functional, it could be, all sorts of things. Yeah.
Do you use any qualitative research alongside of quantitative to generate ideas?
Yeah, so we're constantly running surveys on our Order Complete page to learn more about our customers. So we have a whole backlog of surveys that are launched every single week.
Do you ever follow up on those and do sort of deep dive not face-to-face, do you actually talk to these people based on what survey response they've given you?
Yeah, so we have two main angles for that. So we do, Net Promoter Score, and we send these emails to get information from customers. And part of those surveys ask if we're able to talk to them. We then also run other surveys that are just surface on the Order Complete page, and those are very basic, and we just want to keep them simple, make sure that we have a high response rate, and just get data bit by bit. So things like, how old is the child that you've bought the product for? Who have you bought this for? What occasion have you bought for? Just these simple types of things. And they always surprise us because they always give us information that we didn't have. I ran a survey similar, what was it? Who did you buy for? So who do you think, who do you people think customers will typically buy for? Will it be for their own children? Will it be for children with an extended family? Friends' children? Children's friends?
Niece, nephew.
Yeah.
Godchild.
Godchild, yeah. That was in there. It's really low, I'm sorry to say. So a third of customers responded that they buy for children of their friends. About 30%, or just under that, bought for extended family, so niece, nephew, that sort of thing. There's only 20% for their own children, so actually 80% don't buy for their children. So that was interesting because we did a similar poll within the company while that was running, and then presented back, how wrong everybody was, basically, because that's fun. But this is all. I've always run quizzes wherever I've been, and the rate of success in answering a question, whether it's a test, this one won or this one, which do you think, or a survey, is always just so low. It's 10% or something like that.
How do the founders deal with the fact that they're constantly wrong about it?
They're really good about it because information was wealth and power and understanding, basically. So the better we can understand and the more things we're doing to understand our customers and understanding how people behave is always, applauded, I guess. Cool. I'll move on. This is also a short one. So I'm trying to think of the right question to ask everybody here. Have you worked with many retail companies in a Q4? Anybody here? Yeah. What usually happens?
Lockdown.
Sorry? What was it?
Lockdown.
Lockdown. Crazy. Crazy is a good word. So with these companies that you've worked with or for, have you ever been able to implement anything or test anything? Or, yeah, okay. And it's crazy. So this is a reenactment of a retail company's Q4. This is a reenactment of our company's Q4, basically. I love this GIF. It's hilarious. So contrary to what I've always been told in every company that I ever worked with when I was on the vendor side, we can't do anything, we're not doing anything, nothing's going to happen, shut up.
Yeah, because you're a consultant. I mean,
Yeah.
Really, nobody in Q4 wants a consultant touching anything.
I feel like I built a good level of trust with the companies I work with. You don't know that. This is true. You don't, external vendors, are the devil, aren't they? Sometimes they're not the most favorite people of companies. It's true. Everything was in-house here. I had a better understanding of what was going on. Contrary to what most companies do, which I think they do have this code freeze. We're probably too young a company and dumb a company to have a code freeze yet. I think we're rethinking things for 2016. But ultimately, our goal was to really step things up in Q4. So testing was allowed. And as part of the Q4 roadmap for the Purchase Journey Squad, I made room for that. We tested a lot, but we kept it low risk and relevant. I think the failure I've seen when running tests during a Q4, when the traffic is so unbelievably unpredictable, and you can't predict anyone's behavior, you don't know what's going to happen, is you can't just run your basic sort of UX kind of tests. You need to run very seasonal tests, things about Christmas and gift giving and these sorts of things, imagery related to that. So our focus was very basic imagery, copy, nothing else, and we ran a series of tests that worked really, really well. And we don't know that they're actually going to work really well non-peak season, so we're not necessarily going to implement them for this next, this first 9 months of the year. But it allows us to learn for the next year. So this is a very, very simple thing that we did. Watching the video is actually a key engagement we look for because we tie higher conversion to it. So the control was, magical personalized storybook, personalized for SEO purposes, watch our video and see how it works. And we tested more gift-oriented headlines. Give a child a one-of-a-kind gift this year that has inspired over 10,000 children, sparked almost 1 million imaginations. Both those, those variants just killed it. They did so well. Ultimately, the optimal one was this sparked almost 1 million imaginations. But even just running that over a short period of time with enough volume, we're able to deliver that for the remainder 3 weeks of peak season, and that turned into thousands of books. Just by running the test, we generated 800 additional books from running it. So I think there is merit in testing in Q4 if you're still kind of a smallish company. But I think in any company, as long as you're able to keep it relatively low risk, then there is a case to be built. So that was a huge success among a few other tests that we ran that did very well during the period. So this is another one. We did Xmas delivery messaging, which we could have just deployed, but this was kind of the first time we were doing this. We print a product on a bespoke product on demand. So our shipping timelines are totally different from your traditional e-commerce. We need longer lead times. So we had to be quite specific about certain types of messaging, and we created this dynamic messaging. We tested different copy of the messaging, and This was the eventual best version that we kept running, but we kept iterating because we were able to be quite reactive and change copy. I mean, this was version 3. The first version just totally bombed, but we reacted quickly enough. We iterated several times, and in the end, we increased the amount of expedited shipping because this would change to you can still get your order if you use free express shipping right now. And we also increased conversion in certain EU markets, so that was good.
So this kind of testing is very
sensitive to timing. So
You're very right. Yeah. We are in the midst of doing further analysis to understand the timing. So, for example, version 1 may have bombed because maybe it was presented too early. You're absolutely right. It was actually not. It was only a few days removed from version 3 though, because we were iterating so quickly. But a few days can make a difference. So there may be some unknowns for us, absolutely. But there are definitely lessons that we've learned from it that we'll be able to take on to next year. So when things started to tip in our favor, we can identify that and say, okay, this is when we should push the messaging and not be so distracting and disruptive before that time. It's a very good point.
Next.
This is the reenactment of our Christmas party. Sorry.
So next Q4.
Yeah. Oh,
knowing
that's distracting.
all of these observations from the previous Q4, what was your first Q4? Presumably, you could have all of your multivariate set up with all the dimensions of interest, and you could just have it ready to go, and then you get the results in real time. And you could,
Yeah.
So you know that that's coming.
Yeah.
You know next year is going to have a Q4. Or this
We do.
is going to have a Q4.
Yeah.
And you know the questions that you have left over from the last Q4. So you could, in theory, have it all queued up and ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was kind of the goal behind it.
There's not another corporate reorganization between now.
Yeah, we should assume that will happen, actually. But yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the whole purpose of that. There were a lot of people actually who pushed back on us in the company who said, no, the message should just be there. And I was very nervous about it, and for good reason. Had we done it, what the original plan was, I think we would have lost a fair amount of orders and books.
4.2%.
And that's huge for the amount that we sold in the quarter. So, yeah. Cool. So I'll just show this just for fun again because it's awesome. And then move on. So the second last lesson, Facebook ads, a love and hate relationship. It's a lesson for me mostly because I'd never really worked with a company that was so dependent on driving traffic to their site through Facebook ads. Does anybody deal with Facebook ads a lot in their day-to-day? Yeah, okay. Are you from Facebook?
No.
Okay. Don't worry, I don't have anything against Facebook. I have feedback on Facebook ads, though. So we drive a lot of traffic to our site from Facebook ads, a lot. And actually, I think Facebook ads is an incredibly interesting thing. I learned so much about Facebook ads in my first 3 months. So it was our major source of traffic, which is why I love it, because we get a lot of sales from it. You can target scarily. It is creepy, the degree of targeting. I mean, it's yeah. The power of lookalike audiences. So does anybody know what a lookalike audience is? A few people, okay. So you can upload basically a list of emails and it will create an audience that looks like that list of emails, basically. It matches those email addresses to people who use Facebook, right? So all their interests, demographic information, gender, all that stuff. So if you have a customer database with a whole bunch of emails, you can actually create a lookalike audience that you've never contacted before, that you don't have access to, that looks like your customers. And so that, I thought, that's amazing. And the ability to sort of test everything. I mean, I think they could get better at that, but we are pumping out so many different Facebook ads with different headlines and imagery, and the Facebook team is learning all the time. I know the lookalike audiences thing is pretty scary. What do I hate about Facebook ads? So as a person who's embedded in Crow and testing and reliant on to some degree, consistent user behavior to understand if something's working or not, Facebook is the worst. Because you're basically interrupting someone's experience on Facebook with an ad, and they never had any intention of buying a children's book or what have you, and then all of a sudden they're attracted to it and they click on it. With search, or with someone typing in your homepage address or email or anything, they have an intent. So you kind of have a bit more power over understanding them. That wreaks havoc in testing. The unpredictability of audiences, the struggle to glean reusable insights. I think this is a problem that we're still facing on the marketing side of the business. Truly understanding what actually works for Facebook ads. I think the best learning I've heard from someone was that this little knitted bird with a hat in an image is the best thing we've ever done for Facebook ads. I can't explain why, and neither can they, but it keeps driving sales. So we need to get better with our data and our BI to better understand and leverage things for Facebook. For testing and things like that, with headlines and copy, we're actually sending that to the marketing team to try and use for their ads. And the volatility of performance and CPA. So we often have these panicked reactions. So we have a certain threshold for CPA that we want to achieve, and as soon as, in a 10-minute period, people go nuts if it's like way off, and they turn everything off, and all of a sudden there's no traffic coming to the page where you've launched a test, and you're wondering what the hell is going on. So it can be quite frustrating. We've changed the methodology. The marketing team has changed the methodology based on working with an agency and investor that we're also working with. And so we're starting to get better at that. But in the early stages, I just remember things going off and on. I was running a test in the Netherlands when we launched into that market, and all of a sudden I couldn't actually finish the test because we just couldn't get enough data. Everybody was too nervous about doing anything about Facebook. There are frustrations. So how do you address something this complex? What we're doing is, for testing purposes, we have to analyze everything by test source, and even sometimes break that down by some of the audiences that we're targeting in the ads that we're showing. So it is a lot of heavy lifting in terms of analysis, but it has to be done.
But you can't actually do that until 3 weeks, because during that time, Facebook's playing around with things, trying to optimize their CPA.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to get as much money out of you as possible.
Yeah.
And it takes them, because they're doing batch jobs every night, they're not doing it in real time.
Yeah.
And so you're analyzing your results before they figured out how they're going to optimize their results. I mean, you're both working at cross purposes until 2 weeks down the road. Yeah.
We've done it at a very generic high level, really. But that is something I'm going to take back with me. Thank you. We break everything down by source, absolutely. Paid Facebook versus referrals, and sometimes look at a couple of traits, basically like a gender or something like that. But maybe we got it all wrong. So yeah, let's chat. Like that one maybe is way off base now that you say that. But this is a good lesson for me. I'm still learning. Perfect. We're actually organizing a BI structure now within the company. We're a bit behind on that. We don't have as much structure behind that, and a real leader in that area, data scientist, to actually help us model things, because ultimately the marketing team wants to be a bit more predictive and try to forecast through machine learning, predictive modeling, what is going to work for a certain period and a type of audience. And we need just way more analysts, basically. So every group is hiring multiple analysts right now. We actually only have 2 and 1.5 if you include me, because I have other responsibilities in shop. So we have a lot of work still to do. This slide hasn't really changed in 6 months, embarrassingly, but that's how hard it's been to get the right people on board to help us. And we feel it's such a complex problem. It's not the only problem we want to solve, obviously, as well. So all the analysts. Okay, final lesson. This is more of the fun stuff, I would say, or hopefully you thought the other stuff was fun as well. But we started to build a community. This is quite fun to do. People actually have a real appetite for data within Lost My Name. We are quite data centric, but people don't know how to use all the tools. A lot of people want to engage in testing in their respective parts of whatever they're doing, and they want to learn. So there was a great opportunity for me to start a little community. I don't know if we'll maybe open it up at some point beyond Lost My Name, but certainly that would be a goal. So how do you build a community? I don't know. There's so many ways, but I'll tell you what we did. So first of all, what do I mean by community? Failing fast, learning together, involving everybody across the company, ongoing road mapping. We want every insight to actually ask a new question. Building things for everyone. If you build stuff for other people and other teams, they'll really like you and then they'll join the community. It has to be cool things. I'll go into those cool things. Inter-squad mental cooperation and just having so we're trying to have fun with it. Our goal is actually to do a trip for our Crow-munity, is what we call it, embarrassingly, to Split, Croatia. Yeah, it's so bad. Thank you. Okay. So involving everyone, here's an example. So as I said, we do a lot of polling and quizzes and stuff within the company. We ran a test in email, 24-hour abandonment versus 1 hour and 2 hour. The winner was 1 hour. Hardly anybody in the company voted for 1 hour. So it involves a lot of people. It creates awareness. It challenges people's, initial thoughts on how well something might work, their opinions, everything, and it also brings people inside into in the testing world, right? Your first idea is never going to be your best. You shouldn't just go with it. You should try and understand if it actually works.
We're having exactly the same argument at the moment with the marketing team.
Yeah.
How did you get them to agree to even test something like that? Because they've told us they're the experts.
Squads. Autonomous squads. There's actually enough fodder on the internet that actually supports this.
I know, but we've sent them article after article.
Right. Then maybe another approach would be to run the test, but only take a slice to the one that they're nervous about, so a smaller percentage, and see how that goes, and maybe build it up over time. I mean, there are ways to mitigate the risk in this, people being scared of doing things, but
they're not scared of they're not scared of doing things. They're scared of irrelevance. I think that's the issue. Is there's a lot of people threatened by being told they're wrong every day.
So you think they're scared of being wrong, or?
Well, if they're experts and that's their value in the world, then when every day the data says they're wrong, that's threatening to them. With that, I think is the question.
Is that really the?
I think there's a bit of that.
Yeah. Okay. It's such a strange thing to me, I don't know, thinking in that way, because if you want to do the best for your business, then there's so much amazing technology out there that should enable people to do things and understand things at a better level. What are people saying to you? I'm really curious.
They're saying 24 hours.
But why won't they budge? Why don't they?
Because they know.
They just say they know.
Fear of loss. And we've been told to wind our necks back. Yeah.
Like, is that a quote?
Wind your necks back.
How many people are they, and is it just you up against them or something like that? Yeah. It's such a tough one because.
In fact, I might take a picture of that.
I'll tweet it as well. Let's do it.
See, I've always found that that's a really tough one, because most of the people that I've ever talked to, even on the vendor side, when you're trying to convince someone that a testing tool is really essential in today's business, is to show case studies. is to show case studies you've actually run, is to talk about how you can actually mitigate risk for your company and learn more through testing. And I think, again, the wonder for me is that, every time I've ever run a quiz in an event or something like that, and I used to do these quizzes when I was at my last company, when we ran events or I went to other events, and we used to get people to answer on their phones. And it was 7 questions. And we did an uneven number of questions so people could either pass or fail. And the fail rate was 90%. And that is a resonating number for companies. So that was always a story that I would tell in a pitch for people who are very against testing.
I think that's really is people have to have a comfort that they can be wrong and keep their job.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
in traditional marketing, that's not the case.
I'm surprised, I guess, and maybe this is me, but I'm just surprised in this day and age that that's the feeling, especially in digital, right? And if we're doing email and digital, it's come such a long way. But I guess, it is still, it's still a battle.
I think in an ideal world, everyone's working towards one goal, and you're not afraid to be wrong, but that isn't always realistic. Some people are worried that if they're repeatedly wrong, their bosses are going to start questioning whether they know what they're talking about.
There's a great way to spin that, though. I was just able to discover that we've been doing something that would have lost us this much money over the next 6 months, but we've now implemented a solution that will make us this much money over that 6 months or something like that, right? I think you can always turn that into numbers in a positive way. But you're right. I'm fortunate enough to be in a smallish company that is a startup where the mentality is, lean, fail fast, learn quick, all those things. So everybody's kind of on the same page. And man, I've been in this company for too long, even though it's been 9 months, because I've just lost sight of all I used to know. I don't have an answer for you, is the answer. Did you get the picture? Yeah, okay. Share results all the time. So this was a simple test. In the checkout, we ran a order summary open by default that was closed, added a security icon, quite the basic stuff, but you're just trying to make your checkout very simple and easy to get down. So we already had a very high converting checkout, but this did extremely well and generated nice lifts across the board, and especially for mobile. And most of our traffic is actually mobile. Start an actual Chromunity. I already mentioned the Chromunity. Build cool things. So build cool things. We built this real-time thing, which is pretty cool. So basically, it acts as 2 things. We actually have this startup kind of counter in the office that counts the number of books up as they sell, which is kind of fun and nice for morale, and everybody sees it when they walk into the office. But we also were able to surface all that real-time information. So I think I alluded to this earlier, but we started showing 1.36, however many books we'd sold, and it would count up in real time across how many countries, and that's constantly updating. And we were also able to prove that generated lift. That social proof was super powerful in generating lift and conversion. That was cool. There it is on the homepage. And we also built this thing, which we still haven't shipped because we got restructured, but I still have this in the backlog, and it's going to happen. But basically, it's called the Crowbar. If you create a book for a boy or girl named Crow, then you get to this page. You'll authenticate through Slack, and it pops up this little bar, and it tells you, it pulls all this data from Optimizely for all the tests that we're running.
Who's going to understand the importance of which tests are running mutually exclusively of which tests? And
this is a good question. this is going to be a tool that we would train, quite simple, train our customer service team on, because when they're dealing with queries from customers, sometimes there's a variation that people are seeing and that they don't know about. So that they can understand, okay, what page are you on, this sort of thing, and try and get to the bottom of it. So it would directly link to previews of the variation and the test. We also want to spread it so that anybody can submit an idea through this, a test idea. So we'll have a link to a Google form or something simple. Yeah, basically, yeah. I was just going to do like a really bad pun with the word rogue, but I won't. I think you know what it is. But yeah, so it's also about transparency, and I think there's tons of things on that list. You actually reminded me, thanks for that, of all the things that we're doing to actually make it more of a company thing, a tool anybody in the company can use, because we often get on one Slack channel or another, this is going on, hey, is the Crow team running any tests right now? But they'd be able to access everything from this one sort of, almost a dashboard of sorts. So that's the ultimate goal. Crap pun, Brent QA and Dev. Also QA, yeah, so that's the other thing. So you can force any variation through this tool right now, actually, only on the back end.
You patent that?
We've actually, I presented it to Optimizely, and yeah, anyway, they were really excited by it. I was thinking we should patent it. But you can force any variation on a page by selecting the variant of the test, or any combination, even if you have multiple things running and they're actually exclusive from one another. You just have to tick the different boxes and stuff like that and go, let's Crow. So yeah, so it's a fun thing to do. It's just that it's not the priority right now, unfortunately. I wish it was, but every insight should lead to another question. So this is a short story about Internet Explorer. So before I joined the company, you're the best. Thank you. So before I joined the company, there was this. So we have this making.lostmy.name, and there's blog posts by people within the company. And there's this one blog post before I joined. What the hell is going on? Why do IE visitors convert 13% better than Chrome visitors? I have no idea. Do you? So this was the title of the blog post, and nobody really knew. And I finally got around to doing some analysis one day, and I presented this at our Friday. We do a weekly Friday meeting, just for fun. And does anybody have any ideas why Internet Explorer would perform so much better than Chrome?
I'm guessing maybe an age thing. It could be grandparents.
Yeah, that's a possibility. That's definitely what I thought and what many people in the company thought. But it was so basically, look at this data. 5%. I mean, it's almost double Chrome. Really, what the hell is going on here?
Final word computers.
Yeah. So, but the one obvious thing that was staring us in the face is that IE doesn't have a mobile browser. So it's just, looking at your data by a few dimensions or something like that, and then you realize, where have I been? My mind has been somewhere else, actually. Internet Explorer, I don't even know how they, that, but 91% desktop. So obviously our desktop site converts, 3 times better than mobile. So it's heavily biased for desktop users, which is why it converts so much better than Chrome. So we broke out desktop, and then we're like, holy sh! Safari's amazing. So that was good. We were able to establish that actually Internet Explorer is not the best, which I think everybody was relieved by. And lower samples, so probably even the conversion rates slightly inflated, and Chrome was by far the most volume, and Safari. So we looked at the data in a few different ways, and we looked at the age thing next, by desktop, by browser, and we couldn't believe this. Age 18 to 34, 11.36%, 36% typo. why are 18 to 34-year-olds using Internet Explorer? So getting back to every insight leads to a question. So now, this is a really long GIF. It goes on forever, but it's amazing. But it has led to a question that nobody has explored the answer to yet. But the next question is, why in the world are 18 to 34-year-olds the highest converting age group for IE? So then it came up that people working in an office or something and have the unfortunate misfortune to work with the IE browser. Maybe it's expats in China where IE is super popular. Oh, I should look into that. Oh, I just gave myself an idea. Okay, so finally, crap puns are your friend. You've heard a lot of crap puns today already, so I'm just going to run through a few crap puns like this one, this one. And we recently created this thing called the Central Analysis Warehouse, or CA for short. Yeah, it's really bad. I know, it's so bad. I know. But so this has become just an ongoing joke, and the reason we do this, and it's valuable for the community, is because it makes it fun and stupid, and people are coming up with the worst puns all the time, and it actually makes more people want to join the community. So it creates a nice kind of culture and a fun place to be, really. So this is our CA MVP. It's all built in Trello, and we've labeled it in certain ways so anybody can find analysis bits and stuff that we've done. And some of these. So, all the crap puns. So I'm going to summarize. I'm not going to do one by one. I'm just going to give you the 6 lessons as they are. So don't be a hater, organize your data. Try squads on for size up until a point. Unicorns don't exist, aka best practice. Prioritize low-risk testing in Q4. Even if you're a retail company, I would recommend that. Facebook ads are really just the worst and the best. And go forth and create your community and maybe, just maybe, advocate really terrible puns. That's me. Thank you. Shameless promotion, 15% off. Take a picture. Any questions that I can answer that I haven't answered or sort of answered already? No, good.
How do you hire the people that you're trying to hire?
That is a very good question. I actually think that in some ways we get off track with hiring, and we're trying to hire so many roles at a time, and we've only got so many people in the talent team, and everybody, every lead in the company is shouting, I need this role, I need this role, and I feel like they're just being torn in so many directions. And there's a very high expectation for what we need. So at this point, there's a real push to hire a lot of leaders. There's a feeling that we can do better with more leadership. We do have some good leaders in the company, I think, but we're embarking kind of on this 2016 journey where a lot of our goals will be tied back to teams being successful through excellent, very experienced leadership, and finding that has been tough so far. Yep.
Do you see a need for hiring experts, say in e-commerce, interaction design, or product managers with a lot of experience in e-commerce, or do you think that actually what you've got such a good setup with your data and analytics that you kind of don't need that and you're going to take this strategy? Or do you think there's still some value in having a starting point instead of starting with a blank canvas and then just sort of trial and error?
Yeah.
You probably don't like that phrase.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think we need all those things. I think, one, we can really get better at user testing, actually. I mean, I think we try to do that, and, there's kind of that, just fucking do it, basically mentality with user testing. We're starting to do a bit more of that remotely, but we're probably not doing nearly enough, so we want that sort of interaction design, interview experience. I think that's really critical, actually, to both the physical products and the website experience. We're always looking for amazing product managers, absolutely. We have a very complex stack, and e-commerce experience is actually something we're really looking for. We have a bunch of people in various positions who've never done certain things. We're creating products and new books when we don't really have anybody who's created those types of products before, you know. We have one guy as the writer. We have this one amazing illustrator that we're needing to clone. But on the physical side, we're lacking many of the roles that we're looking for, the experience that we need. We're kind of getting by because there's a lot of smart people in the company, and they have good ideas, and they understand the benefits of testing and going through alpha and beta and all this. So we do have a methodology. We have pretty good data, but I think experience is also, and innovation is just hard to put a value on that. We definitely want that.
So Pedro's not allowed to go skiing.
Yeah, he was sick last week, and it's affected the product roadmap. He basically, Pedro is our illustrator. I showed a picture of him earlier with that balloon. But yeah, he's one of the co-founders basically, and came up with the style of the illustrations and everything. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just going back to best practice, how do you explain it to people who are very much X, Y, Z, it works for them, so it means we've got to do it? How do you then explain to them that it sort of doesn't exist in a way?
I think we're at a point now where people really believe in testing, so we just, we can do it without risk, and we will find out the answer. So it would be a tougher question if it was a question of just deploying something, absolutely. But when testing is quite an accepted now part of the business, it took actually, even though they hired this role, there was still, non-believers, and it took some months for me to kind of bring certain people around in a very design-centric company and that sort of thing. But now it's just an accepted part of how we're meant to work, and most people think about testing when they're thinking about something new that they want to implement. So we're quite fortunate that way. It almost ties back to your question earlier. I mean, it's, how do you actually push that test down the road then? I guess there are all these benefits from it that you list off, but you could get very stubborn people who just, don't want to do it.
And you've got to keep testing because things change.
All the time.
There's a question. If there is a deadline but the test result didn't come back positive, then how do you iterate and what decisions, on what basis your decisions are made?
In some cases, some of the tests that we've run, so for example, when we lost a bunch of traffic to a page because they turned off Facebook ads, we just had to basically accept the situation and say, we're not going to be able to get a result with this, and move on.
You still follow the test?
No, I mean, if we don't know for certain that something's going to have a positive impact on the business, then we won't implement it. Yeah.
Can I just ask the final question? We'll all go for drinks, and Tom, hopefully you can stay around for a little while.
Yeah, I'll try.
So anyone can ask Tom, which is nice. What animal is X?
That's a really good question. I don't think anybody can, well, unless you're looking right now.
Is it an X-ray fish, or did I just make that up?
X-ray fish, that would be...
That might be.
Nope, but it's not, it's kind of almost a... It's not, there's not really, we don't have an animal for X, let's say.
Isn't it an oxalot or something?
Ocelot? No.
Oxalot or something. Oxalot.
So it's actually, now you're going to be like, oh, the book is shit. It's a pirate, because X marks the spot, and the story around the pirate is, yes, oh God, the groans. Oh, I'll bring that back to the product team. It's definitely something we'd love to solve. Yeah, it might be easier in other languages. We have UFO, though, for you. Damn it.
Kid's gonna have a name with U and X next to them. Well,
I see where you're going with this, John. UX.
What are UX?
Any other questions?
That's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.